Where to even begin with reality? That's the question of Hegel's Science of Logic. Beginnings are funny things. How do you start something? Like, how do you have a first meeting? Of course, you have a meeting, but you can't properly call it the first unless there are going to be other ones. So the first meeting isn't the first meeting, really, until there's a second one. Once there's a second one, it turns out that was the first. But wait, that means things didn't really start until the second one. The second one was the actual first that let there be a series of meetings. That's very puzzling. If there weren't the first, there couldn't be the second. But if there weren't the second, there couldn't be the first. And in fact, the beginnings are even a little bit more puzzling. Like, let's just think about starting in general. Like, what does it take to start? Well, if it's already started, but that wasn't the beginning. The beginning had to be before that, right? You're already on your way once you've started. So for there truly to be a beginning, that has to be when nothing has happened yet, because once something happened, it's already too late. But if nothing's happened, then it hasn't started yet. So it almost seems like you can't even really have a beginning. And yet, of course, we do, right? So beginning is a very sort of paradoxical notion. But this isn't just a logical concept. This isn't just a little game. I mean, the fact is, beginnings are weird kinds of realities. Right? What do we mean by a beginning? We mean where things come from. So if you think, oh, I have something I want to say, maybe you go on to say it. That's great. The fact that you went on to say it, though, came from some source, right? It came from that, whatever it was, inspiration or idea you had. But when you had that as a desire to say something, it wasn't really worked out. If you had already taken the time to work it out in words, well, then you effectively said it. You just said it to yourself instead of saying it out loud. But if it's really a thing that we're thinking of as what's motivating you to speak, it hasn't yet been given the form of words. Right? And when you do then express those words, they come from that thing, but they're a realization of it. They don't really exhaust it. They're not the only way it could have happened, So the beginning, the source in you, and the thing that ends up getting expressed stand in this interesting and sort of puzzling relationship, that the beginning is as kind of generative power that is expressed and realized in what you say, that stuff couldn't exist except by relationship to it, but it's not reducible to it. And on the other hand, if you didn't end up saying something, it wouldn't have been anything. So sources are weird. They're sort of real, but they're not a real thing that's actually already happened. They're more like a power or a possibility rather than an actuality, some actual thing. So that's beginnings in general. Well, what about reality? When we say being, we're really talking about what it is that lets there be all this stuff. We mean the source of reality. Being is that which is the very substance and cause and fabric of everything that is, right? I am because there is being, and my existence is a tiny little bit of what being itself does, right? So if you really want to understand stuff, you'd have to understand that nature of being that explains how there can be all this. It's like that generative source. But in the same way, it can't be a being. If it were a being, well, that would be one of the things that has to be explained by being. So being can't be any actual being. It has to be that power, that source by which all these things are. But if it's not an actual being, it isn't. Right? So being is both something it couldn't possibly be reduced to or exhausted by beings, yet it's also nothing other than beings. There isn't anything to being other than what actually is. So being itself, or reality itself, is this strange tension of being as the generative source that is not exhausted by beings, and all the beings that are, without which there would just be nothing. Right? In the same way that what you end up saying is both a bunch of actual words, but the realization of that, inspiration or idea that you had. And it's that tension between those things that is the reality of your speaking, in which you both succeed and fail at bringing out what you had within you, right? Well, that's what the relationship between being and beings is like. And so Hegel's point is that that's what reality always is. It's this strange tension of the infinite and the finite, the realization of a power that doesn't exhaust that power, but also a power that doesn't amount to anything other than, anything more than what there actually is. And you can't understand being as a whole or any individual thing if you don't understand it in terms of that tension between being and beings.